On a quiet farm in rural Louisiana, a 54-year-old black woman tends her cotton fields before dawn. But her morning routine is disrupted when she finds tire tracks and cigarette butts near her fence, signs of someone watching. That night, armed men storm her property, shouting slurs and setting fire to everything she built. What they don't know is that she's ex-Special Forces, and this land isn't just her home, it's her battlefield. Before we go back, let us know where you're watching from, and subscribe because tomorrow I've got something extra special for you. In rural Louisiana, where cypress trees guard quiet bayous and sunrises paint the sky in fiery hues, a hate-filled crew targeted a lone, aging black farmer named Imani Jackson. They saw an easy mark, assumed she was soft, alone, fragile. They didn't see the silent discipline in her posture or the combat history etched into her gaze. They didn't know the fields she now cultivated had once witnessed bloodshed, not of crops, but of men. A single call to her old Special Forces unit changed everything. By dusk, their ambush crumbled. The attackers fled, but the consequences Imani brought down were just beginning. Morning light hadn't yet touched the Louisiana horizon when Imani's eyes opened. Decades of military precision meant her body still stirred at precisely 0400. She lay still for a moment, absorbing the stillness of her farmhouse, feeling the cool air drift through the half-open window. Her bedroom was simple, comfortable. A sturdy pine dresser sat against one wall. Her bed faced the window overlooking her cotton and pecan groves. The only personal item was a framed photo of her old unit gathering dust on the nightstand. Imani swung her legs over the bed's edge, her joints protesting softly. At 54, her body daily reminded her of her service's cost. Yet she moved with purpose, pulling on worn jeans and a faded work shirt. Her morning ritual was as precise as a tactical brief. It grounded her. In the kitchen, she started coffee brewing before lacing up her work boots. The rich smell filled the space as she stood at the sink, observing her 30 acres. The pre-dawn dark began to lift, revealing rows of young cotton stretching towards the distant tree line. Her small flock of chickens would be stirring in the coop. "Another day," she murmured, pouring coffee into her favorite ceramic mug, a gift from Javier years ago. Its familiar weight felt solid in her hand. Imani stepped onto her front porch, inhaling deeply. The morning air was heavy with moisture, carrying the sweet scent of blooming jasmine from a neighbor's property. Her farm was her refuge now, a stark contrast to her former life's chaos. Here she found meaning in tending the land and fostering growth rather than inflicting destruction. She walked towards the barn, gravel crunching under her boots. The chickens were already pecking at the ground. She scattered feed, counting them by habit, 20 hens, 2 roosters, all present. Something caught her eye as she turned towards the pasture, unusual tire marks in the damp earth near her fence. Imani crouched, studying the deep treads. These weren't from her truck or regular deliveries. The tracks were fresh, likely from the night before, showing a vehicle that had stopped, turned quickly, and departed. Her combat instincts, never truly dormant, ignited. Imani walked her property's perimeter, checking for other disturbances. She found more tracks near her back gate, along with discarded cigarette butts not her brand. Someone had been watching her farm. The rest of her morning chores were performed with heightened awareness. She fed and checked her cattle. 15 head, all healthy. But her mind kept returning to those tracks. Years of training told her this wasn't random. Someone had been casing her land. As the sun climbed higher, Imani worked her fields, checking irrigation and soil moisture. The physical labor helped calm her nerves, but the feeling of being observed persisted. By late afternoon, her shirt was drenched with sweat as she finished repairing a section of fence. The sun was setting when she finally headed back to the house, her shadow stretching long across the yard. Inside, she cleaned up and started a simple dinner garden, vegetables, and grilled fish. The routine was comforting, but her movements were now taut, her senses sharp. The first unusual sound came just as she was plating her food. Engines, multiple vehicles approaching fast down her private drive. Imani extinguished the kitchen light and moved to the window. Her pulse quickened, but her hands remained steady as she parted the curtain. Headlights cut through the deepening twilight, illuminating her yard in harsh white beams. 3 pickup trucks rolled towards her house, their engines roaring aggressively. Behind them, she saw more vehicles approaching. Imani's tactical mind engaged automatically, assessing threats and options. The truck spread out, encircling her property in a trained maneuver. This wasn't random aggression, this was coordinated. In the headlight glare, she saw men exiting vehicles carrying weapons. The orange glow of torches bobbed in the darkness. Her hands clenched as she watched them advance, at least a dozen armed men moving purposefully across her land. The same land she'd purchased after retiring, seeking peace. The same soil she'd worked daily for the past 6 years, striving to cultivate something good to offset the past's fatalities. Now they were here to destroy it all. Through the window, Imani saw their faces clearly now, masks of hate illuminated by torchlight as they fanned out around her house and barn. They carried rifles and shotguns, some brandishing burning torches like something from a nightmare of another era. Imani moved silently through her darkened house, years of special forces training taking over. Her movements were fluid, deliberate, each step carefully placed to avoid creaking floorboards. She needed to reach the barn fast. The sound of shattering glass tore through the night. A bottle crashed through her kitchen window, flames erupting as the Molotov cocktail spread burning gasoline across her floor. The acrid smell of smoke filled the air. Imani slipped out the back door, staying low in the shadows. The attackers were fanning out their torches, casting dancing shadows across her property. Their voices carried clearly through the night air. "Burn it all down," someone yelled. "Show her what happens when she doesn't know her place." The words made her jaw tighten, but Imani stayed focused. 20 yards to the barn. She could make it. Darkness was her ally. She'd spent years mastering unseen movement. She reached the barn's side door just as the first shots rang out. They were firing into her house now, glass breaking and wood splintering under the assault. Imani slipped inside the barn, moving directly to a hidden panel in the wall. Behind it lay a waterproof case containing her carbine magazines and body armor insurance she'd hoped never to need. The barn doors crashed open. Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as 2 men entered, their boots crunching on hay. Imani smelled gasoline. They planned to torch the barn too. "Check the loft," one ordered. "Make sure she ain't hiding up there." Imani moved like a phantom, silent and lethal. Her hands found familiar positions on her rifle as she melted deeper into the darkness. The attackers were sloppy, untrained. They'd separated from their group, making themselves vulnerable. A terrible sound split the night, the death scream of one of her cattle. They were slaughtering her livestock now. Rage flared in Imani's chest, but she kept it controlled, channeled. Emotion got you killed. The first attacker never saw her coming. Imani struck from behind, one hand clamping over the man's mouth, while her other arm locked around his throat. The struggle was brief, ending with a sharp crack, as Imani twisted, severing the spinal cord with practiced efficiency. The second man turned at the sound, raising his shotgun. Imani was already moving. She slammed into the attacker's midsection, driving him back against the barn wall. The shotgun blast went wide, deafening in the enclosed space. Imani struck twice, throat and temple, dropping her opponent like a stone. Outside, more vehicles had arrived. Imani counted at least 15 attackers now, their faces hidden behind masks as they destroyed everything in sight. Her chest tightened as she watched them spray paint her barn with racial slurs, their hatred raw and ugly in the torchlight. A burst of automatic fire ripped through the night, but not aimed at her. Imani recognized that sound, Javier's heavy machine gun. Her old friend had arrived. "Contact," someone screamed. The attackers scattered as Javier's weapon forced them to cover. Imani used the chaos to her advantage, moving to a firing position at the barn's window. 2 attackers ran past her position, trying to flank Javier. Imani dropped them both with precise double taps. The training never left you. Aim, squeeze, confirm. Pain exploded in her left shoulder as a round found her. Imani rolled away from the window, blood soaking her shirt. The wound was bad, but not immediately fatal. She'd survived worse. Imani Javier's voice boomed across the property. "Give me some cover fire. Moving to your position." Imani forced herself up, ignoring the burning in her shoulder. She laid down, suppressing fire, forcing the remaining attackers to duck behind their vehicles. Javier sprinted through the gap, his powerful frame moving with surprising agility for a man his age. "Damn," Sister Javier said as he reached Imani's position. "You sure know how to throw a party." His eyes narrowed as he saw Imani's wound. "You're hit. I've had worse paper cuts." Imani grunted, though the pain intensified. "They're pulling back." Indeed, the attackers were retreating, now engines roaring to life as they fled into the night. Javier kept his weapon trained on their escape route until the last vehicle disappeared. The aftermath of violence lay scattered across Imani's farm. Her house-burned livestock lay slaughtered in the fields, and hateful messages defaced her buildings. The peace she'd built here lay in ruins. "How'd you know?" Imani asked, letting Javier examine her wound. "Been watching these bastards?" Javier replied, his voice tight with anger. "Knew they were planning something. Didn't know it'd be this big, though." He helped Imani to her feet. "This ain't over, sister. Not by a long shot." Imani looked out over her burning property, the land she'd worked so hard to nurture now scarred by hatred. The peaceful farmer in her mourned the destruction, but another part, the warrior she'd tried to leave behind, was awakening. These men had brought war to her doorstep. The sun crept over the horizon, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of angry red. Imani sat on the remains of her front porch steps, her shoulder freshly bandaged by Javier's skilled hands. The morning light revealed the full extent of the devastation. Blackened buildings, dead livestock scattered across blood-stained fields, and hateful messages carved into her land. 6 years of work, Imani said quietly, her voice rough from smoke inhalation. "Everything I built here." Javier stood beside her, his rifle still close at hand. "We'll rebuild it, sister. Every damn bit of it." Imani touched her bandaged shoulder, wincing. The pain helped keep her focused, kept the rage from overwhelming her. 4 dead attackers lay covered with tarps near the barn, waiting for law enforcement. 2 more had escaped with injuries. The rest had fled like cowards into the night. "Sheriff's department should have been here hours ago," Javier said, checking his watch. "I called it in right after the shooting stopped." "They'll come when they want to come," Imani replied. She'd lived here long enough to know how things worked, but even she was surprised when Sheriff Ben Curtis's patrol car finally rolled up around 0700, taking his sweet time inspecting the property before approaching. The sheriff was a tall man with thinning hair and an easy smile that never quite reached his eyes. He walked with the confident swagger of someone used to unquestioned authority. 2 deputies flanked him, looking uncomfortable. "Morning," Imani Curtis said pleasantly, as if he wasn't standing in the middle of a war zone. "Heard you had some trouble last night." Imani stood, slowly ignoring the pain. "That's one way to put it, Sheriff. My property's destroyed, my livestock slaughtered, and I've got 4 dead men who tried to kill me." Curtis glanced at the covered bodies, then at the bullet holes and burn marks. His expression remained carefully neutral. "Looks like quite a mess, though. I have to ask you, sure, this wasn't just some dispute that got out of hand, maybe over property lines or grazing rights?" Javier stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "Are you serious? Look around. Look at what they wrote on the ground." The sheriff held up a placating hand. "Now, Mr. Jackson, I understand you're upset, but let's not jump to conclusions. Could have been drunk kids causing trouble, making it look worse than it was." Imani pointed to her destroyed house. "Drunk kids with military-grade weapons, with organized tactics, who knew exactly where to hit me." She kept her voice level through sheer force of will. "This was a coordinated attack, Sheriff. They came to kill me." "That's a mighty serious accusation," Curtis said, writing nothing in his notepad. "Did you recognize any of them? Get any names?" "They wore masks," Imani replied. "But I can describe their vehicles, give you shell casings, tire tracks." The sheriff closed his notepad. "Tell you what, I'll file a report for trespassing and vandalism. Maybe we can track down some of these troublemakers. Have a talk with them about respecting private property." Imani stared at him in disbelief. "Trespassing? They tried to lynch me. They murdered my livestock. They burned racial slurs into my land." Now Imani Curtis's tone turned patronizing. "Let's not make this about race. That'll just stir up trouble nobody wants. File an insurance claim for the damage and we'll keep an eye out for suspicious activity." Javier took an angry step forward, but Imani caught his arm. She recognized the look in Curtis's eyes. The sheriff had already decided what version of events he'd accept. Pushing harder would only make things worse. "Thank you for your time, Sheriff," Imani said quietly. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. Curtis tipped his hat. "Sorry about your property, Imani. Times like these might be worth considering selling. Lots of buyers interested in good farmland." With that parting shot, he and his deputies returned to their vehicles and drove away. Imani waited until they were gone before sitting heavily on the steps again. Her shoulder throbbed in time with her pulse. That racist piece of Javier started. "Save it." Imani cut him off. "We both knew how this would go." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun climb higher. The smoke had mostly cleared, but the stench of burned buildings and dead animals hung heavy in the air. Imani thought about the years she'd spent building this place, trying to create something peaceful after decades of war. Now violence had found her again, and the law wouldn't help. "What's the play?" Javier asked finally. He knew that look in his friend's eyes. Imani stood carefully. "Decision made. Get me my comms." Javier retrieved Imani's satellite phone from his truck. One of the few things that hadn't been destroyed. Imani scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she needed. She hadn't called it in years, but some connections never broke. She pressed dial and waited. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Elena Vance." Imani took a deep breath. "I need you here now." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Imani's ravaged farmland as a black, armored SUV rolled up her gravel driveway. Dust billowed behind the vehicle as it came to a stop. Imani and Javier watched from the porch, their faces grim but expectant. Elena stepped out first, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, wearing tactical pants and a dark shirt. Ben Carter emerged from the passenger side, carrying a large metal case, his face tight with concern. Khalil Hassan unfolded his tall frame from the back seat, scanning the property with practiced eyes. "My God, Imani," Elena said, taking in the burnt barn and slaughtered livestock. Her usual commanding presence softened with genuine pain for her old friend. Imani nodded slowly, her jaw clenched. "Appreciate you coming so quick." Ben set down his case and moved to embrace Imani, careful of her bandaged wounds. "Sister, you should have called sooner. Didn't want to drag you all back into this life," Imani replied quietly. Khalil placed a steady hand on Imani's shoulder. "We're family. This is what family does." They gathered in Imani's living room, which had become a makeshift command center. Ben unpacked his equipment with practiced efficiency. Laptops, surveillance gear, and communication devices spread across the dining table. Elena stood at the window, her tactical mind already assessing sight lines and defensive positions. "Tell us everything," Elena commanded, her voice carrying the same authority it had during their Special Forces operations. Imani and Javier recounted the attack in detail. Ben's fingers flew across keyboard keys, pulling up local police reports and social media activity. Khalil made notes in a small notebook, his tracking expertise already at work. "The Iron Guard," Ben said, turning one laptop around. "They've been growing bolder in the last 8 months. Their leader is this piece of work, Silas Thorne." The screen showed a man in his 40s with close-cropped hair and cold eyes. Several photos showed him at white supremacist gatherings, always at the center of the crowd. "I know that face," Javier growled. "He was here last night, staying back while his boys did the dirty work." Elena leaned over Ben's shoulder, studying the intelligence. "They've got a pattern. Small farms, minority owners, escalating violence. But this attack on you, Imani, it's different, more coordinated." Ben connected additional monitors, creating a web of information. Surveillance camera feeds from nearby roads began populating the screens. Khalil studied tire tracks and photographs taken that morning, comparing them to vehicle registrations. "Got something," Khalil announced after an hour of intense work. "Thorne's group operates out of an old warehouse off Highway 10. Used to be an industrial supply depot." He pulled up satellite imagery. "They're careful, but not careful enough. Their communications are encrypted, but—" His fingers danced across the keys. "Amateur hour. I'm in." Elena studied the warehouse layout. 3 entry points, loading dock on the west side, main entrance facing east, emergency exit on the north wall. Her mind was already forming tactical approaches. Khalil returned from scouting the perimeter of Imani's property, found fresh tracks matching the ones from last night. "They've been watching probably for weeks." He spread out a local map. "They're using these back roads here and here," explains how they approached without being noticed. Imani stood at the table, her presence drawing everyone's attention. The others saw the change in her, the farmer replaced by the warrior they'd known for decades. "We need confirmation on Thorne's location." Ben nodded, typing rapidly. "Already on it. I've tapped into their cell networks. Thorne's phone is pinging off towers near the warehouse. He's there right now, running it like a command center," Elena observed, studying the surveillance feeds. "At least 25 members coming and going. Heavy weapons. They're not just some backwoods hate group." "No," Imani agreed. "This feels more organized, professional." Ben's system beeped, and new information flooded the screens. "Got video confirmation. Thorne just arrived at the warehouse 15 minutes ago. Live footage showed the gang leader's truck pulling into the loading dock. The team gathered around the monitors, watching intently as Ben cycled through different camera angles. The warehouse bustled with activity. Men moving crates, vehicles being prepped, weapons clearly visible. They're planning something bigger, Javier said, his voice tight with anger. This wasn't just a one-off attack. Elena straightened up, her decision made. We need eyes on that warehouse. Close surveillance, full coverage. She looked at each team member in turn. We do this right. We do this clean. We find out exactly what we're dealing with before we move. Imani nodded, trust in her old team evident in her expression. These were the people she'd gone to war with, the ones who'd never failed her. Now they were here, standing in her kitchen, ready to fight another battle. Ben continued monitoring the feeds, setting up automated alerts. Khalil prepared his tracking gear, ready to establish observation posts. Elena began sketching out preliminary tactical plans while Javier checked their weapons. The afternoon light was fading, casting the room in shadows, broken by the glow of monitoring screens. The warehouse location was confirmed. Thorne's presence was verified. The first phase of their operation was set. Night wrapped around the warehouse like a shroud. Imani and her team moved through the darkness with practiced silence, their night vision goggles revealing the terrain in ghostly green clarity. Elena had positioned them strategically. Imani and Javier would breach the loading dock while she and Ben approached the main entrance. Khalil provided overwatch from a nearby rooftop, his rifle trained on potential escape routes. 4 guards north side, Khalil's whisper crackled through their earpieces. 2 more by the loading dock, regular patrol every 10 minutes. Imani checked her watch. They had 6 minutes until the next patrol. She and Javier pressed against the cold metal of a shipping container waiting. The warehouse loomed before them, its windows casting dim yellow light into the night. Ben's voice came through. Security cameras looped. They're blind. Elena's command was crisp. Execute in 3, 2, 1. Imani moved first, swift and silent. The guard never saw her coming. One precise strike to the throat, another to the temple. The man crumpled without a sound. Javier handled the second guard with equal efficiency. At the main entrance, Elena and Ben neutralized their targets with synchronized takedowns. 4 guards down, no alerts raised. Loading dock clear, Imani whispered, moving to phase 2. They breached the side door using Ben's electronic bypass. The warehouse interior spread before them. Stacks of crates, weapon racks, and a makeshift office elevated on a metal platform. Imani spotted Thorne through the office windows, hunched over paperwork. 7 tangos on the floor, Khalil reported from his position. 2 by the weapons cache, 3 near the vehicles, 2 walking the catwalk. Elena's voice was steady. Take them. The team moved like shadows. Imani tracked the catwalk guard, timing her approach. When the man turned, Imani struck a quick chokehold, easing the unconscious body down silently. Below her, team worked with lethal precision. Elena took down 2 men by the weapons with rapid hand strikes. Ben and Javier moved in perfect sync, neutralizing the others before they could raise an alarm. Thorne remained oblivious in his office music playing through his headphones. Imani approached from behind while Elena covered the door. Through the glass, they could see Thorne bobbing his head to whatever he was listening to, completely unaware. Imani kicked the door in. Thorne spun, reaching for a pistol on his desk. Imani was faster. Her hand clamped around Thorne's throat, slamming him against the wall. The gun clattered to the floor. "Hello, Silas," Imani growled. "Remember me?" Thorne's eyes widened with recognition and fear. "How did you?" Imani tightened her grip. "You burned my farm, killed my animals, left some choice words on my land." Her voice was deadly calm. But something doesn't add up. Elena entered weapon-trained on Thorne. Ben and Javier secured the rest of the warehouse, zip-tying unconscious guards. This was too organized professional. "Who paid you?" Imani continued. Thorne struggled, his face reddening. "I don't know what." Imani slammed him again, harder. "Wrong answer." Okay. Thorne gasped. "We got paid good money, more than we've ever seen." "Who?" Elena demanded. Thorne's eyes darted between them. Some ex-military guy said he had a personal score to settle with Jackson. Wanted it to look like our usual job's racial stuff. But this was different. He called himself Commander Vance. The name hit Imani like a physical blow. She released Thorne, stepping back. Elena's weapon didn't waver. "That's impossible," Imani said. "Vance is dead. Afghanistan 9 years ago." Thorne shook his head, rubbing his throat. "Not dead. Met him face to face. Older guy, military bearing, scary calm, you know. Had pictures of you." Knew everything about your routine, said you owed him a debt in blood. Imani exchanged looks with Elena. They both remembered Afghanistan, Operation Desert Serpent, the mission that went wrong. The civilian casualties they'd never fully explained. He's lying, Javier said from the doorway. No, I swear. Thorne's voice cracked with genuine terror. Vance is alive. He's been planning this for years. Said you took everything from him, so he was going to take everything from you. Started with the farm, but that was just the beginning. Ben appeared with a laptop. He's telling the truth. Found encrypted communications. They match old Special Forces protocols, ones Vance would have known. Imani stared at Thorne, her mind racing. Alan Vance, her former commander, her mentor, the man who taught her everything about being a ranger, the man whose death she'd carried as another weight of guilt. Where is he now? Imani demanded. Thorne shook his head frantically. Don't know. He contacts us. Different burner phones, different drops. Never stays in one place, but he's out there, ma'am. And he's not going to stop until you're dead. Elena moved closer to Imani, her voice low. If Vance is alive, then everything we thought we knew about Afghanistan was wrong. The implications were staggering, Imani finished. A commander they'd trusted presumed dead, now orchestrating attacks from the shadows. Thorne slumped in his chair, defeated. He said you'd figure it out eventually. Said when you did to tell you something. He swallowed hard. Said to tell you remember the ghosts of Serpent. Dawn crept over Imani's farmhouse, casting long shadows through the burned fields. Inside, the team huddled around Ben's array of laptops and monitors, their faces lit by the blue glow of screens. Empty coffee cups littered the table, evidence of their sleepless night analyzing the intel from Thorne's warehouse. Look at this, Ben said, fingers flying over the keyboard. Security footage appeared, showing a figure in a dark coat meeting with Thorne. The image was grainy, but the military bearing was unmistakable. Facial recognition showed a 71% match to Vance's last known photos. Imani leaned closer, studying the familiar stance, the way the man held himself. Her stomach tightened. That's him. Elena pointed to another screen displaying financial records, wire transfers through shell companies, all leading back to offshore accounts. He's been moving serious money, not just to Thorne's group, but to similar organizations across 4 states, building a network Javier added, spreading out a map marked with red pins. Each pin represents an attack on minority-owned farms in the last 9 months, all following the same pattern as yours, Imani. Khalil, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. He's been testing tactics, perfecting his approach. Your farm wasn't the first. It was the culmination. Imani stood pacing the worn floorboards. The weight of revelation pressed down on her. I need to tell you about Operation Desert Serpent, she said finally. The full story, the part that never made it into any report. The team grew still. They'd all heard rumors about that mission, but Imani had never spoken about it. 9 years ago, remote village in Afghanistan, deep in the mountains, Imani began, her voice heavy. High-value target named Omar Khan. Vance was commanding officer. I was lead scout. She paused, the memories sharp as broken glass. We'd tracked Khan for weeks. Finally got intel he was meeting operatives at a remote compound. Elena nodded. I remember the briefing. Clean shot. Minimal collateral risk. That's what we thought. Imani stopped pacing, facing her team. I had the compound in my sights. Khan in the scope. But something was wrong. Civilian movement patterns we hadn't anticipated. I radioed Vance, recommended we abort, but he gave the green light anyway. Javier said softly. Imani nodded. Direct order. Take the shot. So I did. Her hands clenched. The intel was bad. Khan had moved his entire family to that compound, his wife, his children, and others. The shot triggered a secondary explosion. The whole building. Ben pulled up classified photos on his screen. The destroyed compound, the bodies, the aftermath. 22 civilians, Imani continued, including Khan's family. And she took a deep breath, including Vance's wife and young son. They'd been captured. Khan had taken them months before, but the intel never reached us. Vance knew they were missing, but never imagined they'd be there. Silence filled the room. The horror of understanding dawned on each face. Vance disappeared after the mission review, Elena said. They found blood evidence of a firefight. Everyone assumed that he'd been killed by Khan's men, but he wasn't. Imani finished. He's been planning all these years, building his revenge, using hate groups as his weapons, turning my race against me, making it look like simple bigotry while he pulled the strings. Khalil stood suddenly. Incoming transmission breaking through our firewalls. The main screen flickered. A face appeared. Older, weathered, but unmistakably Alan Vance. His eyes were cold, his smile cruel. "Hello," Imani Vance said. "I see you finally figured it out. Took you long enough." Imani stepped forward. "Alan, don't." Vance's voice cut like steel. "Don't pretend you feel anything but fear right now. You should. You took my family from me, made me watch through your scope as they died. Now I'm going to take everything from you. Slowly, piece by piece." The camera panned, showing photos pinned to a wall. Imani's farm, her friends, the team. Surveillance shots taken over months. "Your farm was just the beginning." Vance continued. "I'm going to destroy everything you've built, everyone you care about, and you're going to watch just like I did, helpless, unable to stop it." Elena stepped up beside Imani. "You're insane, Alan. This won't bring them back." Vance laughed, a hollow sound. "This isn't about bringing them back, Elena. This is about justice, about making her feel what I felt. The ghost of Serpent demanded it." "The ghost of Serpent were innocent," Imani said. "This is just murder." "No, Imani. This is war. And I learned from the best you, the team. All those lessons about precision, strikes about using the enemy's weaknesses. I have just chosen different weapons. Instead of bullets, I use hatred. Instead of bombs, I use fear." The screen showed more photos, other farms, other victims of the hate group attacks. "Every person I've hurt, every life I've destroyed, their blood is on your hands, and I'm just getting started." Ben's fingers flew across the keyboard, trying to trace the signal. Vance smiled, noticing. "Don't bother, Ben. You taught me too well about covering tracks. When I'm ready, you'll find me." Until then, his eyes locked onto Imani. "Watch your back. Watch your friends. Because you never know which moment will be their last." The screen went black, leaving the team in stunned silence. Imani's hands gripped the back of a chair, knuckles white with tension. The morning sun now streamed fully through the windows, but the warmth couldn't chase away the chill of Vance's threats. Elena immediately took charge. "We need to secure the perimeter now." She pulled out a tablet, drawing up a quick tactical map. Ben set up motion sensors every 60 yards. "Khalil, get the drone coverage expanded. We're blind out there." Imani nodded, her military training kicking in. "I've got weapons stashed in the tool shed. Javier, help me." She turned, but Javier was already gearing up, checking his pistol. "I'll do a sweep of town," Javier said, sliding spare magazines into his vest. "Something about those photos Vance showed. Some were recent. He's got eyes on us, which means he's got people nearby." "Not alone," Imani said sharply. "We stick together." Javier shook his head. "Town's got too many corners, too many witnesses. One person draws less attention. I'll keep comms every 20 minutes. He checked his watch. "Mark time now." Elena stepped forward. "He's right, Imani. We need intel. And Javier knows how to stay invisible." She handed Javier an encrypted radio. "First sign of trouble. You call. No heroics." Imani didn't like it, but she knew they were right. She clasped Javier's shoulder. 20 minutes, 1 second late, and we come in hot." "Copy that." "Copy that." Javier grinned, but his eyes were serious. "Keep the coffee hot." They watched from the porch as Javier's truck disappeared down the dirt road. Ben was already setting up the perimeter sensors while Khalil launched a small surveillance drone from the back field. Imani and Elena worked methodically, retrieving weapons and ammunition from her hidden cache. They transformed the farmhouse into a defensive position, covering angles, establishing fields of fire. It was familiar work, bringing back memories of countless missions. The first radio check came right on schedule. "Town looks quiet," Javier reported, checking the sheriff's office next. Something feels off about static cut through his words. "Say again," Imani called. "You're breaking up. Multiple vehicles unmarked. More static. Think I've been made." Elena was already moving. "Track his signal." Ben's fingers flew across his laptop. "Got him." 4 blocks from the sheriff's office, the sound of gunfire crackled through the radio, followed by the screech of tires. "Contact 4 shooters, maybe more." The transmission cut off in a burst of static. Imani was running to her truck, Elena right behind her. They peeled out onto the road, gravel spraying. Ben's voice came through their earpieces. "Taking heavy fire. He's moving south on Willow Street. Multiple pursuers." More gunfire echoed through the town, both through their radios and in the distance. They were still 3 minutes out. "Lost his signal," Ben reported. "Last known position behind the old hardware store." Imani pushed the truck faster, taking corners with practiced precision. They reached the hardware store in a screech of brakes. The street was empty, but fresh rubber marks scarred the asphalt. Shell casings glinted in the morning sun. "Split up," Elena commanded. "Clear the area. Watch for civilians." They moved with practiced efficiency, checking corners, doorways, any possible hiding spot. The back alley told the story, scattered brass scuff marks in the dirt, signs of a fierce hand-to-hand struggle. A dumpster bore fresh bullet holes. Imani found Javier's radio crushed and bloody near a loading dock. Dark stains marked the concrete, still wet. Tire tracks led away, deep impressions suggesting a heavy vehicle. Imani Elena called from around the corner. She stood by a dark sedan, its side door open. Inside, tactical gear lay scattered. Professional-grade military issue. These aren't local thugs. These are operators. Imani examined the gear. No markings, but the setup is familiar. Private military contractors. Vance is hiring professionals now. They heard sirens in the distance. Elena grabbed her arm. We need to move. Sheriff's department will be here soon, and they're not on our side. Back in the truck, Imani gripped the steering wheel so hard it creaked. The image of Javier's bloody radio burned in her mind. Her oldest friend, the man who'd saved her life countless times, now in Vance's hands. We'll find him, Elena said firmly, reading her thoughts. Vance wants an audience. He'll contact us. Imani nodded slowly. But what will be left of Javier when he does? They drove back to the farm in heavy silence. The morning sun now feeling like a spotlight exposing their failure. Ben and Khalil met them at the door, faces grim as they reported their findings. The attackers had used signal jammers, professional tactics, coordinated teams. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a precisely planned operation. Imani placed Javier's broken radio on the table. The blood on it now dried dark. Her voice was steel when she spoke. Vance wanted us to know he could reach us anywhere. Fine. Message received. She looked at her team. Now we show him what happens when he takes one of our own. The farmhouse hummed with tense activity as screens flickered in the darkened room. Ben hunched over multiple laptops, his fingers dancing across keyboards, while lines of code reflected in his glasses. Khalil operated the surveillance drones, methodically scanning every warehouse and industrial zone within 60 miles. Elena coordinated with her old intelligence contacts, calling in favors accumulated over decades of service. Imani paced her boots, wearing a path in the wooden floor. Every few minutes, she'd stop to study the growing web of information on the wall, satellite images, property records, power consumption data. Her jaw clenched tighter with each passing hour. Got something, Ben called out, breaking the pre-dawn silence. Heavy data traffic from an industrial complex outside town. Way more bandwidth than they should need. Elena leaned over his shoulder. Could be streaming video, or could be nothing, Imani said, but moved closer to examine the data. We can't afford another wild goose chase. The screens suddenly went black. When they flickered back to life, Alan Vance's face filled them all. Hello, Imani. Vance smiled, looking exactly as Imani remembered him, except for his eyes. Those were different now. Colder. I thought you might want to see how your friend is doing. The camera panned to show Javier strapped to a chair, bloody but conscious. His face was swollen, one eye completely shut, but his good eye glared defiantly at the camera. Imani's hands curled into fists. Javier, don't you dare give these bastards anything, Imani Javier spat, earning a brutal backhand from Vance. Ben Imani whispered urgently, tell me you're tracking this. Working on it, Ben muttered his fingers, flying signals bouncing through multiple servers. Vance produced a knife, testing its edge. You know, Imani, I spent years planning this, learning everything about you, your routines, your weaknesses. He pressed the blade against Javier's throat. Your friends. Elena touched Imani's arm, steadying her. They all knew Vance was trying to provoke a reaction to make Imani lose focus. Commander Imani said evenly, using Vance's old title, this is between you and me. Let him go, and I'll meet you anywhere. Oh, but this is between you and me. Vance dragged the knife down Javier's arm, drawing blood. You took my family. Now you get to watch while I take yours one piece at a time. Javier didn't scream, but his face contorted in pain. Imani felt each cut like it was slicing her own flesh. Got a trace, Ben announced. Signals coming from the old Sterling manufacturing complex 12 miles north. What else can you tell me? Imani demanded, forcing herself to look away from the screens. Elena spread out a satellite map. 4 buildings all connected, heavy security setup, motion sensors, cameras, at least 24 heat signatures moving inside. More mercenaries. Khalil added, marking guard positions from his drone feed. Professional pattern to their movements. They're expecting us. On screen, Vance continued his methodical work, explaining each cut to Imani in detail. Javier had stopped talking, conserving his strength, but his eyes never lost their defiant glare. "You've got 90 minutes, Imani Vance finally announced. Then we moved to power tools. The screen went dark. Imani stood absolutely still for several heartbeats, her breathing controlled and measured. When she spoke, her voice was ice. "Ben, what's our best entry point?" "Loading dock on the west side," Ben replied, pulling up thermal images. "Blind spot in their camera coverage. But Imani, this is exactly what he wants. He's waiting for us." "I know." Imani moved to her weapon case, selecting her gear with practiced efficiency. But he made two mistakes. First, he thought watching Javier's torture would break me. She checked her rifle's action. Instead, it just reminded me who I am, what I'm capable of. Elena recognized the cold precision in her movements. This was Imani, the warrior, the woman who'd earned her reputation in 100 classified missions. And the second mistake, Imani slammed a magazine home. "He forgot who taught me everything I know about combat." She faced her team, her eyes hard as granite. "Vance trained me, shaped me into a weapon. Now that weapon's coming for him." She laid out her tactical vest methodically, checking each piece of equipment. This isn't just about rescue anymore. Vance wanted to make it personal. She looked at each of her teammates in turn. He succeeded. This is war. The team moved with renewed purpose, preparing for battle. Elena coordinated their approach vectors while Ben hacked the facility's security systems. Khalil prepped their vehicles, ensuring multiple escape routes. Imani finished her preparations, donning her combat gear like a second skin. Each piece felt familiar, awakening muscle memories from countless missions. But this time was different. This wasn't about following orders or serving country. This was about saving family. She checked her watch. 63 minutes until Vance's deadline. Just enough time to arrive and unleash hell. "Gear up," she ordered. "We move in 5. Midnight cast long shadows across the Sterling manufacturing complex. Imani led her team through the blind spot. Ben had identified their movements, silent and precise. Security cameras swiveled uselessly above them, locked in an endless loop thanks to Ben's hacking. The loading dock door yielded to Elena's electronic bypass. They entered in diamond formation. Imani on point, Elena and Ben covering the flanks. Khalil watching their 6. Their night vision gear painted the world in ghostly green. Imani held up her fist, stopping the team. 2 mercenaries passed through the intersection ahead, their weapons held professionally. She waited until they were past before signaling the team forward. 4 tangos. North corridor, Elena whispered through their comms. Imani responded with hand signals. Split and flank. The team divided smoothly. Years of training making them one fluid unit. Imani and Elena went left while Ben and Khalil went right. The mercenaries never saw them coming. Imani struck first, her knife, finding the base of the first man's skull. Elena took the second with a chokehold, easing him silently to the ground. Ben and Khalil emerged from the shadows to catch the third and fourth between them. No shots fired, no alarms raised. They moved deeper into the complex, following Ben's mapped route to where the video signal originated. Each intersection brought new threats. Each threat was eliminated with cold efficiency. A burst of gunfire shattered the silence. Someone had spotted them. "Contact," Imani shouted, diving behind a concrete pillar as bullets chipped away at the wall behind her. Elena's rifle barked 4 times. 2 mercenaries dropped. "Move." They pushed forward aggressively, now speed becoming more important than stealth. Ben's suppressing fire kept the enemy pinned while Khalil flanked through a side office. More mercenaries poured in from adjoining corridors. Imani's rifle spoke in controlled bursts. Bodies fell. Shell casings bounced off concrete floors. The smell of cordite filled the air. 1 minute to target room, Ben called out between reloads. A grenade bounced around the corner. "Down," Imani yelled. The explosion rattled windows and showered them with debris. Through the smoke, Imani saw the heavy steel door where they were holding Javier. 2 mercenaries guarded it with belt-fed machine guns. "Cover me." Imani sprinted forward as her team laid down suppressing fire. The guards turned their weapons toward her, but too late. Her first shot took the left guard in the throat. Her second and third put the right guard down permanently. Elena reached the door first, placing breaching charges while the others maintained security. "Ready breach," Imani ordered. The door blew inward. Imani was through before the smoke cleared her rifle, scanning for threats. The room was empty except for Javier, still strapped to the chair, head slumped forward. Javier. Imani rushed to her friend, checking for a pulse. It was there, weak but steady. "Took your sweet time," Javier mumbled through swollen lips. "Complain later," Imani said, cutting the restraints. "Can you walk hell?" "No," Javier grinned bloodily. "You get to carry my heavy ass." Imani hoisted Javier over her shoulders in a fireman's carry. "Team, we're mobile. Let's go." They started their extraction, moving more slowly now, with their wounded teammate. Elena took point while Ben and Khalil covered their flanks. Multiple contacts converging. Ben warned, checking his tablet. "They're trying to box us in." An explosion rocked the building, then another. The floor trembled beneath them. "They're collapsing the structure," Elena shouted. "Move!" Imani staggered as another blast went off nearby, nearly losing her grip on Javier. Concrete dust filled the air. Support beams groaned ominously above them. They ran, no longer trying to be tactical. Gunfire pursued them through the corridors. Ben paused to return fire, taking a bullet in his vest, but dropping 3 pursuers. "Exit 40 meters ahead," Elena called out. The final explosion caught them just as they reached the door. The blast wave threw Imani forward. She tucked and rolled, protecting Javier as best she could as they hit the ground outside. Elena and Khalil dragged them both to their feet. Ben provided covering fire as they sprinted for their vehicles. Engines roared to life. Tires squealed on asphalt. They peeled away from the collapsing building as gunfire sparked off their armored panels. Anyone following, Imani asked, cradling Javier's head in the back seat. "Negative," Khalil reported from behind the wheel. "Clean getaway." The drive back to the farmhouse passed in tense silence, broken only by Javier's labored breathing. Imani kept pressure on her friend's worst wounds, silently willing him to hold on. Dawn was breaking when they finally pulled up to the farmhouse. Elena had medical supplies ready. They carried Javier inside and began treating his injuries, cleaning wounds, stitching cuts, setting broken fingers. "You look like hell," Imani told her friend once they'd finished. "You should see the other guys." Javier managed a weak smile. Imani squeezed his shoulder gently. "Rest. You're safe now." She stepped outside onto her porch, watching the sunrise with her team. They were exhausted, covered in blood and concrete dust, but alive. They'd gotten Javier back. For this moment, at least, it felt like victory. Dawn painted the farmhouse kitchen in soft orange light as Imani carefully cleaned the last of Javier's wounds. Her friend winced as antiseptic touched raw flesh, but remained stoic. The rest of the team moved purposefully around them, Elena organizing medical supplies while Ben and Khalil monitored their surveillance equipment. "Those stitches are going to leave some nasty scars," Imani said, taping down a fresh bandage. "Just more stories to tell," Javier replied weakly. "Besides ladies dig scars." Elena approached with fresh coffee and pain medication. "Here, these should help take the edge off. The good stuff." Javier managed a slight grin before swallowing the pills. Ben looked up from his laptop. "Vance's operation is in chaos. That raid hit them hard. We took out at least 18 of his best men, and the complex is completely destroyed. Local news is already covering the explosion," Khalil added, checking his phone. "Police can't ignore this one." Imani finished with the bandages and stood stretching her tired muscles. "We need to press our advantage. Vance will be a high-pitched beeping cut through the morning quiet." Ben's head snapped toward his equipment. His eyes went wide. Energy spike. Massive electrical surge coming from the world exploded. The blast hit like a giant's hammer, shattering windows and throwing everyone to the floor. Heat and pressure rolled through the house in a deafening wave. Imani's ears rang as she scrambled to her feet. Everyone out now, she grabbed Javier, hauling her injured friend up as more explosions rocked the foundation. Elena appeared through the smoke, helping support Javier's other side. They stumbled toward the door as ceiling beams cracked ominously above. Ben and Khalil were already outside, waving frantically. "The barn," Ben shouted. "More charges." The barn detonated in a massive fireball, sending burning debris raining across the fields. The shockwave knocked them all down again. Imani covered Javier with her body as flaming wood and metal showered around them. Secondary explosions rippled through the property. The greenhouse disintegrated. The equipment shed blew apart. Even the distant storage silos erupted in flames. Years of careful farming literally going up in smoke. The vehicles, Elena yelled, "We need to." Their trucks exploded simultaneously, turning the driveway into an inferno. Vance had thought of everything. Imani watched in horror as fire consumed her crops. The cotton fields burned like a golden sea smoke billowing black against the morning sky. The pecan trees she'd planted 6 years ago crackled and split in the intense heat. Everything she'd built since leaving the service, everything she'd created to find peace, all of it burning. "Move, get to the tree line," she shouted over the roar of the flames. They half-carried Javier away from the destruction, finally reaching the relative safety of the woods that bordered the property. For nearly an hour, they could only watch. The fire department eventually arrived, but there was little they could do except contain the spread. Imani's farm burned until there was nothing left to burn. When the flames finally died down, they emerged from the trees. The devastation was total. Where Imani's house had stood for generations, only scorched foundation remained. The fertile fields were now ash and cracked earth. Even the old oak tree by the drive, the one her grandmother had planted, was a blackened skeleton reaching toward the sky. Imani walked through the ruins in a daze, boots crunching on debris. Here and there, twisted metal or broken glass crunched under her feet. A charred photo frame caught her eye. The picture of her parents on their wedding day, now curled and burned beyond recognition. Imani. Ben's voice was tight with anger. "You need to see this." He held up his tablet. A new video message was playing. Vance's face filled the screen, older and harder than Imani remembered, but still wearing that same cold smile. "I told you I'd take everything from you, just like you took everything from me," Vance said, "but I'm not finished. Meet me at our old training ground. You remember the place. Come alone or I start targeting your team's families next. Time to end this where it began." The message ended. Imani stared at the blank screen, feeling something shift inside her. The shock and grief crystallized into pure focused rage. Elena touched her arm. "Imani, we need a plan. We can't know." Her voice was quiet but hard as steel. "No more plans, no more tactics. He wants me. He gets me." "You can't face him alone," Javier protested from where he sat propped against a tree. "That's exactly what he wants." Imani looked around at her team, her family. Then she looked back at the smoking ruin of her home. Everything she'd built to escape violence had been destroyed by violence. The peaceful life she'd tried to create was now ash and ember. She could feel the warrior she'd tried to leave behind stirring to life again. The patient farmer was gone. What remained was the weapon the army had forged her into. "He thinks he's broken me," Imani said, her voice carrying the promise of retribution. "He thinks this makes us even." She picked up her rifle from where they'd stashed their weapons in the woods. The familiar weight felt right in her hands again. The team regrouped at Ben's hunting cabin, a modest two-room structure tucked away in dense Louisiana woods. Imani sat at a worn kitchen table cleaning her rifle with mechanical precision, while the others tended to Javier's wounds on a makeshift cot. The cabin's single bulb cast long shadows across rough wooden walls. "Your bandages need changing," Elena said to Javier, her voice carrying forced calm. She worked methodically, trying to hide her concern at his wincing. "These cuts are deep, but they'll heal clean if we keep them covered." Ben paced near the cabin's single window, his laptop balanced on one arm. "I've got satellite imagery of the training ground. It's been abandoned for years, but there's recent vehicle activity. Vance has definitely been setting up shop there." 3 access roads Khalil added from where he studied maps spread across the floor, all easily monitored. "He'll see us coming no matter which way we approach." Imani continued cleaning her rifle, each movement precise and familiar. The smell of gun oil filled the small space, mixing with antiseptic and wood smoke from the small stove. "Not us," Imani said quietly, not looking up. "Just me." The cabin went silent except for the soft crackle of the stove. Elena's hand stilled on Javier's bandages. "Like hell," Javier growled, trying to sit up straighter. "You're not facing that psychopath alone." He said, "Come alone, or he targets your families next." Imani finally looked up, her eyes hard. "You know he means it. You saw what he did to my farm. We can set up overwatch positions," Ben argued. "Stay hidden, but close enough to know." Imani's voice was firm, but gentle. "This started between me and Vance. It ends the same way." Elena slammed down the medical supplies she was holding. "This is exactly what he wants. He's isolated. You destroyed your home, and now he's trying to separate you from your team. It's tactically stupid, and you know it." Imani set down her cleaning cloth and faced them fully. "You're right. It's what he wants. But sometimes you have to spring the trap to end the game." She looked at each of them in turn. "I need you to trust me like you did in Afghanistan, like you did in Somalia." The mention of their shared combat history hung heavy in the air. They'd all followed Imani's judgment in impossible situations before. She'd earned that trust with blood and success. Khalil spoke up, his usual quiet voice carrying weight. "What's your real plan, Imani? You're not walking in there just to die." "No." Imani stood and began methodically checking her gear. "I'm walking in there to end this, but I need you all to do something harder than fighting. I need you to wait for what Ben asked. For whatever comes next." Imani shouldered her pack. "If I don't make it back, you hunt him down. If I do—" She managed a grim smile. "Well, we'll need help rebuilding the farm." Javier struggled to his feet, ignoring Elena's protests. He limped over to Imani and grabbed her shoulder. "Sister, don't do this. Not alone." Imani pulled her oldest friend into a careful hug, mindful of his injuries. "Some debts can only be paid one-on-one. You taught me that, remember?" Javier's jaw clenched, but he nodded slowly. They all remembered the night in Fallujah when Javier had gone alone to face the terrorist who'd killed his brother. They'd trusted him then. Now he had to return that trust. Elena approached next, her anger replaced with fierce concern. "You've got 4 hours before full dark. After that, we're coming in. Families be damned." Imani nodded. It was more time than she needed. The team watched from the cabin's porch as Imani's figure disappeared into the lengthening shadows. The sun was setting behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Imani drove an old truck they'd borrowed from one of Ben's contacts, taking back roads to avoid attention. The familiar Louisiana landscape rolled past, but her mind was already at the training ground, remembering its layout planning approaches. The abandoned military facility appeared exactly as she remembered, a sprawling complex of concrete buildings, rusted equipment, and overgrown training courses. The main gate hung open, its chain cut. Imani parked outside and continued on foot, moving silent as a ghost through deepening twilight. The facility had been their advanced training ground 20 years ago. Every building, every corner, every sightline was etched in her memory. She could almost hear the echoes of younger recruits running drills, Vance's voice barking orders, the crack of gunfire on the range. Now it was a tomb of military ghosts, perfect for their final confrontation. As darkness claimed the sky, Imani moved deeper into the complex. Her boots made no sound on broken pavement. Wind whispered through empty doorways, but beneath the natural sounds, she caught the faint hum of generators, the glint of fresh boot prints in old dust, the subtle signs of recent activity masked by someone who knew how to hide them. Vance was here. Imani could feel his presence like a storm about to break. She paused in the shadow of the main administration building, letting her senses extend into the gathering night. 2 decades of combat experience told her she was being watched. Somewhere in the darkness, her former commander was waiting. The game was beginning. Imani moved through the shadowy training compound like a ghost, her rifle at the ready. Moonlight filtered through broken windows, casting strange patterns across debris-strewn floors. Every step brought back memories. Young soldiers running drills, Vance's commanding voice echoing off concrete walls, the pride of earning their tab. The air felt thick with dust and tension. Imani's boots crunched softly on scattered glass as she cleared each room with practiced precision. The building's layout was exactly as she remembered, but now everything was stripped bare, leaving only skeletal remains of their former training ground. A faint metallic click made Imani freeze. Her enhanced hearing, honed by decades of combat, picked up the subtle sound of movement above. She melted into the shadows of a doorway, controlling her breathing, becoming one with the darkness. "Welcome home, Imani." Vance's voice boomed through the empty halls, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "I knew you'd come alone. Always the honorable one, weren't you?" Imani didn't respond. She tracked the voice's origin, noting how it echoed differently from various speakers hidden throughout the building. Classic misdirection. But Imani hadn't survived this long by falling for basic tricks. "Nothing to say to your old commander," Vance taunted. "The man who made you what you are." A shadow moved on the catwalk above. Imani fired 2 precise shots, splintering metal where Vance had been a split second before. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Vance's laugh echoed again. "Still quick on the trigger, just like in Afghanistan." Imani advanced carefully, using the building's support columns for cover. "You want to talk about Afghanistan? Let's talk face to face." "Oh, we will." Vance's voice dripped with venom. "We'll talk about how you gave the order to fire without confirming the target, about how my wife and son died because of your arrogance." Something clattered across the floor, a flashbang. Imani turned away just as it detonated, but the blast still left her ears ringing. Through the disorientation, she sensed movement behind her. Imani spun, barely deflecting Vance's knife thrust. The blade sliced air where her throat had been. They crashed together in a brutal exchange of strikes, each person calling upon years of close combat training. Vance was still powerful despite his age, his technique precise and lethal. He drove Imani back with a combination of strikes, his face twisted in rage. "You took everything from me." Imani absorbed a punch to her ribs, countering with an elbow strike that caught Vance's temple. "We were hunting terrorists. Your family wasn't supposed to be there." They were visiting his brother. Vance roared, landing a devastating kick to Imani's knee. "If you'd waited 10 minutes for confirmation, you'd have known that." They separated, circling each other in the dim light. Blood trickled from a cut above Imani's eye. Vance favored his right side, where Imani's elbow had found its mark. "I've lived with that guilt for 9 years, Imani said, her voice raw. "But you're using it to justify murder, using hate groups to destroy innocent lives. You've become everything we fought against." Vance charged again, his attack fueled by pure hatred. They exchanged a furious series of blows, neither person giving ground. The sound of their combat echoed through the empty building. Flesh striking flesh, grunts of pain, bodies slamming against walls. Innocent Vance spat blood. "Like my son was innocent. He was 7, Imani 7. He landed a devastating combination that sent Imani staggering. I had to identify their bodies. What was left of them, Imani recovered, blocking Vance's follow-up attack and countering with a sweep that took the older man's legs out. They both went down hard, grappling on the debris-covered floor. Each person sought submission holds, trying to end the fight. "I see their faces every night," Imani grunted, fighting for position. "But this won't bring them back. You're just creating more victims." Vance headbutted Imani, stunning her momentarily. "Good. Now you know how it feels to lose everything." He wrapped his hands around Imani's throat, squeezing with murderous strength. "To watch your world burn." Imani's vision began to darken. She could feel Vance's fingers crushing her windpipe. With desperate strength, she bucked and rolled, breaking the grip. Both individuals scrambled to their feet, gasping for air. "You're right about one thing," Imani wheezed, settling into a fighting stance. "I did make a mistake in Afghanistan, but I won't make another one tonight." Vance charged with a roar. Abandoning technique for pure aggressive fury, Imani sidestepped, using her opponent's momentum against him. In one fluid motion, she trapped Vance's arm and executed a perfect throw, driving him into the concrete floor with crushing force. The impact knocked the wind from Vance's lungs. Before he could recover, Imani had him pinned, one arm locked behind his back, in an unbreakable hold. Vance struggled, but the position was secure. Imani could have ended it there. One sharp twist would break Vance's neck. Instead, she maintained the hold, forcing her former commander to face the cold floor. "Do it," Vance growled. "Finish what you started." Imani increased pressure on the hold, causing Vance to grunt in pain. "No, you don't get to die a warrior's death. You're going to face justice, real justice for everything you've done." Imani kept Vance pinned, her knee pressing firmly into the older man's back. With her free hand, she pulled out her phone and activated the video recording. "Now you're going to tell the truth, all of it." Imani increased pressure on the hold, making Vance wince. "Start with how you survived Afghanistan." Vance struggled against the restraint, but Imani's grip was unshakable. "You can't prove anything." "Wrong answer." Imani twisted slightly, causing Vance to gasp in pain. "The world's going to know exactly what you've become. Start talking." Vance's laugh was bitter, echoing off the concrete walls. "You want the truth? Fine. I survived the explosion in Afghanistan, woke up in a village 4 days later. When I learned what happened to my family," his voice cracked with rage. "I decided to die that day. Commander Alan Vance ceased to exist." And then Imani prompted, keeping the camera steady. "Spent years planning building networks, finding people who could help me destroy you completely." Vance's words dripped with venom. "The Iron Guard were just useful idiots, easy to manipulate with their own hatred. I fed them targets, gave them weapons, pointed them at your farm." "Keep going," Imani commanded. "Tell them about Sheriff Curtis." "Easiest one to buy." Vance laughed darkly. "Already corrupt to the bone. Money in the right accounts." And suddenly, hate crimes disappeared from police reports. Evidence vanished. Witnesses changed their stories. The sound of footsteps echoed through the building. Imani tensed but didn't release her hold. Elena emerged from the shadows, her weapon trained on Vance. Behind her, Ben and Khalil secured the perimeter with practiced efficiency. Couldn't stay away, could you? Imani said, managing a slight smile despite her exhaustion. You really think we'd let you face him alone? Elena moved closer, her expression hard, as she looked down at Vance. We've got the building surrounded. Federal agents are on their way. Vance renewed his struggles. You think this changes anything? You can't undo what happened. No, Imani agreed, but we can stop you from hurting anyone else. She addressed Elena without taking her eyes off Vance. Ben's evidence already sent to every major news outlet and federal agency. Elena confirmed. Sheriff Curtis was arrested 15 minutes ago. His deputies are cooperating, turning over everything. Red and blue lights began flashing through the broken windows. The sound of vehicles and voices grew outside as law enforcement arrived. Ben appeared with 2 federal agents, their badges gleaming in the dim light. Commander Alan Vance, one agent, announced formally, "You're under arrest for conspiracy terrorism, attempted murder, and multiple federal hate crime violations." Imani maintained her hold while the agents approached with handcuffs. This is Justice Allen, not revenge. That's the difference between us. As the agents secured, Vance Imani finally released her grip and stood slowly, her body aching from the fight. Elena steadied her with a supportive hand. The press is outside, Ben reported, joining them. Whole circus is waiting. Got multiple agencies fighting over jurisdiction. Let them fight, Elena said. We've got enough evidence to bury him in any court. They watched as the agents led Vance away. The former commander walked with his head high, but his defeat was evident in every step. Outside, camera flashes burst like lightning through the windows. Imani leaned against a wall, suddenly feeling every year of her age. Any word on Javier stable, Khalil reported quietly. Doctors say he'll make it, already asking when he can come home. A small smile crossed Imani's face, stubborn as always. More agents entered the building, photographing evidence and documenting the scene. Imani's team stayed close, forming a protective circle around their exhausted sister. The farm, Imani started thinking of her destroyed home, is just land Elena finished firmly. We'll rebuild it together. Ben nodded. Already got contractors lined up, communities rallying too. Amazing what people will do when the truth comes out. Through the main doors, they could see Vance being led to a waiting vehicle. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras recorded every moment of his public disgrace. The man who had hidden in shadows for so long was finally exposed in the harsh light of justice. You did it, Imani Elena said softly. You brought him in alive. Proved you're still the better person. Imani watched as the vehicle carrying Vance disappeared into the night, followed by a convoy of law enforcement. We did it. All of us. The team stood together in the empty training compound, each lost in their own thoughts. The building that had once forged their brotherhood had now witnessed its ultimate test. They had faced their past, confronted betrayal, and emerged stronger. Local police began securing the scene with yellow tape. Evidence technicians carefully documented the signs of combat, photographing blood spots and collecting samples. The night would be long, full of statements and official reports, but the hard part was over. Should we say something profound? Ben asked, breaking the heavy silence. Seems like we should mark the moment somehow. Imani straightened up, wincing slightly. Nothing to say. Let's go home. Imani sat on the edge of the motel bed, her body still sore from the fight with Vance. The cheap TV mounted on the wall played yet another news report about the scandal. Elena occupied the room's only chair, while Ben and Khalil leaned against the wall, all of them watching intently. Former Army Special Forces Commander Alan Vance has been indicted on multiple federal charges, the reporter announced. Sources say his operation extended across 4 states, manipulating hate groups and corrupting local law enforcement. Ben clicked his tongue. They're still uncovering more. My data dump is keeping investigators busy. Good, Elena said firmly. Let them follow every thread. The news showed footage of Sheriff Curtis being led from the police station in handcuffs, his face twisted with shame. Several of his deputies had already turned state's evidence, revealing years of covered-up crimes and destroyed evidence. Imani's phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Javier was awake and asking for visitors. She stood carefully, her muscles protesting. Need company, Elena asked, already knowing the answer. I got this one, Imani replied. Stay here. Keep tracking the fallout. The hospital was only 10 minutes from their temporary base at the Delta Pines Motel. Imani found Javier propped up in bed, looking better than he had 3 days ago. The bruises were fading to yellow, and some of the smaller cuts had already scabbed over. About time you showed up. Javier grinned weakly. Been watching the news. Looks like we started quite a storm. Imani pulled up a chair. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, then backed over, then hit again. Javier adjusted his position slightly. Doc says I'll make a full recovery, but... He paused, looking serious. I've been thinking, sister. Maybe it's time to really retire. No more operations, no more battles. You sure about that? Imani asked, though she already knew this was coming. Yeah, I got enough scars to last a lifetime. Javier's expression softened. Besides, somebody's got to help your stubborn ass rebuild that farm. Can't trust you to do it alone. Imani felt a weight lift from her chest. The idea of Javier finding peace, staying safe, felt right. Could use the help, she admitted. A knock at the door interrupted them. Imani turned to see Pastor Evelyn Reed, the leader of the largest black church in town, standing in the doorway. Behind her were David Kim, who owned the local hardware store, and Sofia Vargas from the Hispanic Community Center. Miss Jackson, Pastor Reed said solemnly, "May we come in?" Imani nodded, curious. The three community leaders entered, their faces showing a mix of shame and determination. "We've come to apologize," Pastor Reed began. "For years we saw the signs, the harassment, the threats, the accidents that never got investigated. We stayed quiet, told ourselves it wasn't our problem." David Kim stepped forward. "We were wrong. What happened to your farm? We should have spoken up long ago, should have stood together. But we're here now," Sophia added firmly. "The community is organizing. We've started a rebuild fund. Materials, labor, equipment, whatever you need." Imani studied their faces, seeing genuine remorse and determination. "This isn't just about my farm," she said carefully. "No," Pastor Reed agreed. "It's about changing things, really changing them. Sheriff Curtis's replacement is already working with federal investigators. The parish commission is establishing an oversight committee, and we want you involved," Sophia said. "Your voice matters. Your experience matters." Javier chuckled from his bed. "They're right, you know. Can't hide out on that farm forever." Imani stood slowly, looking at each of them in turn. "I appreciate the offer, all of it, but rebuilding isn't just about buildings and fences, we know," David said quietly. "That's why we're here. Real change takes everyone working together. The contractors are ready whenever you are." Sophia added, "My brother's company will handle the heavy equipment. David has already donated materials, and my congregation, Pastor Reed, smiled, makes excellent work crews, not to mention the best food for hungry volunteers." Imani felt something shift inside her, not just hope, but a sense of real possibility. The isolation she'd lived with for so long was cracking, revealing a community ready to stand with her. "All right," she said finally, "let's do this right. Build something that lasts together." Pastor Reed extended her hand. Imani took it firmly. Together. From his hospital bed, Javier watched with satisfaction. "Now that's what justice looks like," he said softly. "Not just taking down the bad guys, but building something better." The room filled with discussion of plans and schedules of materials needed and volunteers to be coordinated. Through the window, Imani could see the Louisiana sun shining bright and clear. The land that Vance had tried to poison with hatred would become something new. Not just a farm, but a symbol of what unity could achieve. First priority, David was saying, is getting your house rebuilt before the rainy season. "No," Imani corrected gently. "First priority is making sure everyone knows they're welcome to be part of this. Every color, every background. That's how we really win." The others nodded in agreement, understanding that this moment was about more than construction plans. It was about building bridges, healing wounds, and creating the kind of community that would stand strong against any future threats. The morning sun painted long shadows across Imani's rebuilt farm. 6 weeks of hard work had transformed the scorched earth into something new, something hopeful. Fresh wooden fences lined newly plowed fields, and the frame of a new barn stood tall against the Louisiana sky. Imani knelt in the rich soil, her hands deep in the earth as she prepared to plant the first row of cotton. Beside her, Javier worked carefully, still moving a bit stiffly, but determined to help. Elena, Ben, and Khalil spread out along the row each, with their own section to plant. Around them, dozens of community members worked in groups, some planting, others carrying supplies or setting up tables for the afternoon gathering. David Kim directed a team installing irrigation pipes, while Sofia Vargas's crew painted the last touches on the new storage shed. Pastor Reed moved between groups, offering encouragement and cold water. "Never thought I'd see the day," Javier said quietly, patting soil around a seedling. "All these people coming together like this." Imani nodded, looking at the diverse crowd working her land. Change comes when people decide to make it happen. Elena paused her work, wiping sweat from her forehead. The foundation paperwork came through yesterday. The Delta Resurgence Foundation is officially registered. Good timing. Ben added precision, placing his seeds with almost mathematical accuracy. I've already got 4 veteran farming groups asking how they can get involved. Khalil worked silently nearby, but his usual tension had eased. The peaceful work of planting seemed to soothe something in all of them. Mrs. Miller, an elderly neighbor who'd brought lunch for the volunteers every day since the rebuild began, called out from the new porch, "Food's ready for anyone who's hungry." The workers began gathering under the shade trees where tables had been set up. Imani stood, brushing dirt from her knees, taking in the scene. Children played between the tables, while adults from every background in the community shared food and conversation. "Time to make the announcement," Elena asked, standing beside her. Imani nodded. "Might as well do it while everyone's here." Pastor Reed noticed Imani moving toward the center of the gathering and gently called for attention. The crowd quieted, faces turning expectantly toward Imani. First, Imani began, her voice carrying clearly across the yard. "I want to thank everyone who helped rebuild this farm, but what we've built here is more than buildings and fences." She gestured to the people gathered around her. "Look around. This is what community looks like. This is what strength looks like. And this is just the beginning." Imani motioned to her team to join her. "Today we're announcing the creation of the Delta Resurgence Foundation. It's a foundation dedicated to supporting veterans and minority farmers across the country. We'll provide resources, training, and support to those who want to work the land but face barriers because of who they are or where they come from." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Imani continued, "What happened here? The hatred, the violence. It wasn't just about me. It was about trying to keep things divided, keep people afraid. But look what happened instead." She pointed to the new barn. Every beam in that barn was raised by different hands working together. Every fence post was set by neighbors helping neighbors. That's the real power. Not hatred, not violence, but unity. David Kim stepped forward. "The hardware store is committed to supporting the initiative. We'll provide materials at cost for any project you undertake. And my construction company will handle heavy equipment needs." Sophia added firmly. "The church will coordinate volunteers," Pastor Reed declared. "Whatever's needed, whenever it's needed." Imani felt the momentum building as more people spoke up, offering support, resources, and ideas. This was more than she'd imagined possible weeks ago, standing in the ashes of her old life. The initiative's first project, Imani announced, will be helping Clara Jones restore her family farm over in Iberville Parish. She's an Iraq war vet who's been fighting for closure. "We start next week." Heads nodded throughout the crowd. They understood now this wasn't just about one farm or one community. This was about changing the landscape literally and figuratively. The gathering evolved into an impromptu planning session with people forming groups to discuss logistics, resources, and schedules. Imani stepped back, watching as her neighbors took ownership of the initiative's mission, making it their own. Javier appeared at her side, grinning. "Look at you starting a movement." "We started a movement," Imani corrected. "All of us." Elena joined them, followed by Ben and Khalil. They stood together, watching the energy and enthusiasm spread through the crowd. "It's more than justice," Elena observed. "It's transformation. From ashes to action," Ben added with his characteristic dry smile. The afternoon sun cast golden light across the newly planted fields as Imani and her closest friends moved to the edge of the property. They stood together, looking over the rebuilt farm, the new buildings, the freshly turned earth, and most importantly, the people working together to create something meaningful. Imani felt a deep satisfaction settle in her chest. The land that Vance had tried to poison with hatred now promised new growth, new possibilities, and new connections that would reach far beyond these acres.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.